Hello Space Cats! Some of you have cunningly noticed that I have been missing in action for a few weeks. I'm gonna spill the big old beans. I made a video a couple of weeks ago that was going to be called something like I'm retiring from YouTube. For that reason, I am going to step away from YouTube. I tell you, I felt knackered, exhausted, just so tired, and I just couldn't keep up with doing a weekly video. You've probably seen other videos like this where people say, I'm going to tell you the changes that are going to happen on this channel. I'm not going to do one of those videos, but I am going to tell you I'm probably going to slow down a little bit because I've spent the last 4.5 years making a video pretty much every week, week in, week out. And I tell you what, it has been huge fun. But I've discovered there are other things going on that I have to try and juggle. I mean, I've got my home life, which is kind of complicated. I've got the things that I need to do for work, and my projects for work are getting increasingly busier, and I'm doing a lot more consultancy for making picture books. And I just didn't want to make rubbish videos to just chuck out every week. So I thought, okay, regroup. I need to think about these videos a bit more carefully and put out something that you're really going to get something from, that you're really going to want to watch. So this week's video is all about what happens when it all goes wrong. This is the spread that I am having a bit of a problem with. Let me show you first of all what the Queen Mabel, this lady here, should look like. There she is in another spread. So bear that in mind. When I did my first run at the spread that I need to rectify, I ended up not painting her in because she didn't look like she does here at all. I just couldn't get it. For a start, I've done her hair wrong on this. It should be sweeping the other way. There was just something that comes off in this picture that absolutely did not come off in this one. So I decided, because I quite liked everything else, I liked the way that Tabitha looked, I liked the cake, I quite liked the table, I was umming and ahhing a little bit about Vincent over here. I thought, right, what I'll do is I will paint her out of this, and then I will do her separately, which is here, and then I will drop that in on Photoshop. So that was my plan. And when I did this, there was just something, it was okay actually. She did drop in quite nicely to the picture, but I still didn't like Vincent, and I'll tell you the reason why. If I just get a little bit closer, he just looks a bit muddy. His eyes, I accidentally let a little bit of blue colour go into his eyeballs, and I just couldn't get rid of it. So his eyes aren't nice and bright, and the whole colour is not right for me. So after much deliberation, I decided to ditch this one and start afresh. So here is the afresh one. And I'll tell you the things I quite like about this. Again, I think Tabitha's coming on quite nicely. I think the cake looks great. I really like this kind of splattery effect that I've done in the corners. Some little tiny dots as well. I think Queen Mabel looks okay, although I'm not very keen on her crown at the moment. But again, I'm having problems with Vincent, the little vegetarian vampire bat. So again, umming and ahhing about what to do. Whether I could do him separately and drop him in on Photoshop. I decided I'm going to do a third version. So I'm going to grab my pen and I'm going to ink this. The other thing that I've decided is actually I want Vincent to be closer to the cake, so that my midline is going to be here. This is where the two pages will meet and the fold will be in the middle of the book. So he can't be here, but he could be maybe here. I'm drawing straight onto the watercolour paper, which is not something I would normally do because of making mistakes, but I figured I'm just gonna go with the creative flow. And I'm already liking that so much more. I find it so much easier to draw him flat on than side on, so I think that's going to work. So let's get inking. Now I've finished the inking for that and I'm quite happy. I'm more happy than I was with the other one. So whilst that's drying, because that ink really does need to dry very thoroughly, I'm going to have a look at the other ones that I need to change around a bit. So this is the final spread for this page, which is page 65 and 66, and I was really happy with it. It was looking really great, but when I scanned it in, I needed more sky in it, and there was nothing I could do. I couldn't really stretch it, so because it's got all this very intricate watercolour pattern on it, so I've had to do a second version, which is this, and again a bit more splattery. This is the thing with doing watercolour, is it does what it does of its own. It has its own creative nature. So every time you do something, if you use a lot of water, it will dry differently, and as you can see, these two skies are pretty different. I do like this sky, but there's nothing I can do about that. So I'm just going to carry on with this one. I've started the octopus, I've completed the whale and the dolphin, so I'm just going to do his legs now and the other little bits that need doing, and then we can scan it in. This is why it is super important to let your work dry really thoroughly. I try and let mine sit overnight, although I will admit that I did draw this about maybe 2 hours ago, and I've let it sit in the sun so that it's the warmth of the sun has really dried that ink out, because there's nothing more frustrating than rubbing out, erasing some pencil lines, and some of your ink is still slightly damp and you just go whoop, smudge. Makes you want to cry. Okay, now it's confession time. The eagle-eyed of you out there will have noticed something a bit odd. So a few days have passed since I last filmed, and when I last filmed I was drawing this, because as you might remember, I was not happy with the way that the Queen Mabel looked, and I also wanted to move Vincent. So I did draw this, I inked it, I rubbed out the lines, and I just, although I really like parts of it, I really like the cake, I really like Tabitha, Queen Mabel is definitely an improvement, and I quite like the fruit on the table, and I like where Vincent is. I just was not 100% mad about his characterisation. I think it's something to do with the line I drew around his chin / mouth area. So when I was getting ready to start painting this morning, I thought to myself, is that the best I can do? And the answer came back, no, it is not. So I thought, right, I'm having another go. So I ended up drawing this one, which again I think I actually quite like her a bit better. I like her mouth a bit better than I did the previous one. I added some strawberries onto the table. I think the cake's okay. Tabitha, again, pretty similar to how she was the last time I drew her. And I think I do prefer that Vincent, because I took out that line around his chin, around his face, as it was there. So tell me what you think. Do you prefer that one? Let's call it A. Or do you prefer that one? Let's call that B. I'm going to go with this one because that's my preference, but of course everyone has their own ideas about things. So I'm going to crack on with doing a little bit of painting. I'm probably going to do a lot of wetting and then adding watercolour into that. So you can see that on time lapse now. Here's a quick tip. Now, this has buckled quite significantly. There's a good sort of half of my finger's depth between the table and the paper when I measure it like that. So it's really quite buckled because of the wetness on the top of the paper. So what I'm going to do is, when it's dry-ish, so you can't see any shine if you're lift it up, and there's definitely no kind of like wet puddles or anything, and there's no shine when I'm tipping it and looking at it from a slightly sideways glance. When it's that dry, I'm going to put it underneath some weight, some books and some more paper, just to help that to flatten out again. Oh my goodness me. If you've stuck with me this far, then you seriously deserve a medal, because I'm about to tell you that I didn't like that last Vincent after all. When I painted it, as I've just shown you, I just couldn't feel the love for him. So I decided what I'd do was just doodle some, and I quite like this one that I'm currently putting water on. And I would just use Photoshop to drop it in at the appropriate moment, so that I've actually effectively got two different pieces of artwork that I'm using for just one page. And it ended up working okay. So here is the sped up version of me painting this little Vincent. You can probably see, now that I'm putting the pink into Mabel's dress, that the Vincent that I discarded in the end was not right somehow. There just was something that was not right about him, and I wasn't happy. But the rest of the painting was coming on quite well, so I continued with it. I did all the details. I think her dress looks great from all those splodges of watercolour and the watermarks that have been made on the bottom part of her dress. It gives it a nice texture. And I think the fruit looks great. The colours worked really well, between the sort of cherries on the top of the buns to the red colour for the strawberries, and the bananas look good. So I'm quite happy with the rest of it. It was just that darned Vincent I couldn't get right until I did my doodle version. So I'm really pleased that I did follow my instincts and do what I thought needed to be done. And then for the really fun stuff, I covered up the bit of the painting that I didn't want to get splattery marks on because I don't want it to go over the characters. And then I just loaded up quite a big brush, made sure I had enough of the colour, and tried different techniques of splattering it on to the page. So rubbing your finger along the edges gives you those little tiny splatters. If you want bigger splatters, you need to get a whole load of the pigment and the wet paint onto your paintbrush, and then basically kind of chuck it at the watercolour paper and let it sit where it wants to go. I grabbed one of my tapered round brushes and just really loaded it up and just whacked it on there. Gave it a bit of a splatter too, but really if you want to use this sort of technique you need to use one of those flatter brushes. And it kind of started to feel like it was going pretty well, but you also do need to make sure you move your paper around so not all of the splatters are going in one direction. I think the moral of the story that you can pick up there is if you truly believe in it, if it's something that you really want to do, then you need to come at it from a different angle and just not give up. Who knows what I'm going to be bringing you next week, or the week after, or whenever it comes out. But I will certainly be with you at some point. That's it for now. Until then, nanu nanu.